Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Sean Lesser. Thanks for joining the Real Mental Health Break. Very excited that you're here. We're going to have an awesome show. We have an amazing guest. For the people that are new to the Mental Health Break, we do this show once a week. We have people from really across the spectrum, from entrepreneurs to investors to athletes to people in the medical field, a whole host of folks, talking to them around how they work and deal with mental health. And we have a super cool guest today. Very excited to have him on the show. I was nervous to say his last name, but I'm going to get it right. Brandon DesJarlais. Brandon, did I say it right?
Perfect,
Uh,
Sean.
all right.
Happy to be here,
Uh,
man. Thank you for the opportunity.
no, excited to have you. Brandon has some awesome skills. I'm going to let him maybe just give a little introduction on yourself, and then we're going to play a little video of you, which is unbelievable.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so my name is Brandon. I'm 28, currently living in Los Angeles, professional longboard skater, and executive director of a nonprofit called Beyond the Board.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's play the video, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Perfect.
Yo, Brandon, that's some crazy ass shit, man.
Thank you, man. A little, yeah, little variety sample
Yeah,
pack in there.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit? I mean, especially when you're going up on the bus, that's just
Right.
that's just
Yeah,
nuts.
yeah, no, it's nuts and it's movie magic. So that was
Uh
actually an excerpt from a film called Triple X3, where I
yeah,
stunt doubled for Vin Diesel.
yeah.
Had to shave my head and go to the Dominican Republic for a couple weeks in the
Wow.
middle of nowhere with no service and workshop that. But yeah, it was such an incredible experience. The crazy part is that I actually did that in my non-dominant stance. So I did that jump on the side of the bus backwards.
I don't really know what that means, but it looked cool.
It's like driving a car backwards. I don't know, or
Ah,
swinging a golf club with your other hand.
okay, okay, that gives me
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a good picture.
yeah.
So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your journey, because you know I'm learning about skateboarding because also our friend Greg Noble and Anthony Passett, they
Mhm.
love skateboarding, but I'm new to it. So I think a lot of people that are listening are new to it. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey. That's okay.
Yeah, of course. So much like a lot of kids, skateboards are cool, guitars are cool, and I was fortunate enough to get both because I begged when I was a little kid. And I remember getting my first skateboard when I was like 8 years old, and it was, when you're that age, you believe most anything. And I remember my parents gifted both me and my younger brother a skateboard, and they said, your mom and I used to be professionals at this. And they like did a little move where they like went down the driveway and made a turn, and I couldn't do it at all. And I was like, wow, they must have been professionals. And then after about 2 days of doing it, I was like, okay, well, I can do this and I can do it better than them. So maybe they weren't professionals. But I don't know. I think at the time, it was just fun and cool. And I was a big fan of a show you might have heard of called Jackass, where it was
Yeah, yeah.
a bunch of hooligans doing dumb stuff. Right. And so for me, it was kind of more just like some dorky counterculture stuff when you're a kid. And it wasn't, it never really stuck though for me. I just like,
Yeah.
it was a prop that we'd play with. And it wasn't until I got my first longboard when I was 14 that it really stuck, because compared to the skateboard's got really tiny, hard wheels, and it's hard to actually get anywhere. And it's
Yeah.
very just unpleasant to get anywhere, right? Especially if you're used to riding a bike. And so when I got the longboard, it's got really big, really soft wheels. it was like, okay, cool. This has got that same kind of cool factor, that cool counterculture vibe. But now it just opened up the world to me and gave me so much more autonomy. And it came to me at a really transitionary point in my life when I was in eighth grade. And, know, basically, like growing up, my younger brother, who originally got the skateboard with me, his name is Tim.
Yeah.
He, even though he was a year younger than me, he was always a little bit better in sports. We were always on the same sports team. And
Right.
so there was
Right.
like, we'd steal the ball from each other. There's like a, you know, maybe unhealthy sibling rivalry. And
Normal.
a part of me felt like, um, lesser because I was like, man, he's like smarter than me. He's like faster than me. He's like my little brother. How can this be? And so there was that tension. But then also like he had super bad like anger management
Mm-hmm.
problems,
Mm-hmm.
which once we started to get older, 12, 13, 14, 15, really escalated to the point where there was like, so many like loud, aggressive moments, lots of holes in the walls, like cops at the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so my home situation became like really hostile and
Mm-hmm.
something that I was like shy and really like nervous and scared and uncomfortable bringing anybody to the house.
Yeah.
And so it's when I got that first board, that first longboard, I was like, okay, cool. Like I have my own autonomy. I can kind of tell my parents like, hey, I'm going to go out skating. I'll see you later. And so I just ended up doing that, and I just ended up bringing my board everywhere I went, and I would leave after school, and I'd come back, like, late at night, and just in spending so much time with the board, I learned so much about patience and
Mm-hmm.
perseverance and self-reliance and self-determination, because growing up, like, I did all the sports. I did
Yeah.
football, I did basketball, I did baseball, I did track, I did soccer. I did everything. Wrestling was actually my main sport through high school. But the biggest difference between skateboarding and all these other team sports is that there's no set practice times. There's no coaches telling you what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And so, and most of those other sports are like, reasonably safe, or they're
Yes.
like some sort of like safety gear. Whereas skateboarding is kind of the Wild West. You're on open streets, and especially when you don't know what you're doing, and especially when you're doing downhill skating like I was doing at the time, and you don't really know how to stop, and you're hoping that there's no cars that are going to go through that intersection. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of stupidity, I think, to push through and get to the place where I got. But it was, yeah, really just kind of on a whim, like, didn't wanna be home, uh, found this thing that gave me autonomy, and then just got really good at it and learned so much about myself and gave myself so much confidence through participating on the board, yeah.
But that's awesome. So you kind of felt, I'm gonna say, kind of helped to find peace on the board and kind of get away from what's going on at home and all those different things.
Yeah, big time, and, it was often that, it was a hostile environment at my house,
Yeah,
and
I remember you telling me
y
we had a conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about what was going on in the house?
yeah, it was most of it was related to my younger brother, like,
Hmm.
he just had, just to say, severe anger management problems and would just blow up and, like, make a bunch of threats and break a bunch of stuff, but then on top of that, it caused a lot of tension between my family because everyone has a different opinion
Hmm.
about how to handle that situation, and so even though we had conflicts with him, we also started to have conflicts with each other,
Sure.
My mom was a bit more of a harsh, or direct or strict parent, and my dad was a little bit more loose and empathetic, and so it clashed a lot, and so
Hmm.
there was tension between them, and there's tension between me and them, and so, it would be often that my brother would blow up and have some whole scene, and then we would continue to sit, and that energy would continue to sit and linger and, like, fester between us, and so it was so many times I just felt my nervous system just getting so ramped up, and I was just like, "I'm gonna leave. Peace," And, when you're first learning skating, like I said, it's dangerous, it's nerve-wracking, and being a little bit dangerous, a little bit nerve-wracking, it forces you to only focus on that, because if you don't, you'll hurt yourself,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so yeah, it was like a really good way for me to like completely disconnect from mm, the struggles I was like feeling, and the tension I was feeling. And it was very, very consistent that I'd feel all this tension, and I'd feel all this frustration, and anxiety, and anger, and that I would go out on my board and I'd go play around, and within 15, 20 minutes, even if I had a bunch of aggression at the beginning of it, I would just feel so like calm and peaceful and had a smile on my face. So,
So you would say you're almost kind of lose yourself when you're out on the board, right? Because you
yeah,
got to concentrate. I mean, I'm looking at the video, right? And just going at, I think you're going, I don't know how fast, like 70 miles per hour. So you have to
sometimes, yeah.
concentrate every second. You can't have any distractions because yeah, that's terrifying because you hit a rock or twig, I don't know what, right?
Right.
It's not like skiing where you're
Mm,
falling down in snow. You're
mm,
you're on the cement
right.
and it doesn't give.
Right. Yeah, it's a little more like, if we were gonna compare it to skiing, it's a little more like doing a run through the trees, where
Yes.
there's just so many obstacles and variables coming at you. It's like if you did a run through the trees, but the trees were also moving, and randomly a bear would jump out and start chasing you,
Right, right.
kind of, which doesn't happen too often, on the slopes.
So it sounds like skateboarding was almost also a bit of a like an escape when you were younger. Is that a fair?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think it started as more of an escape, and
Yeah,
it quickly turned into a passion.
right. And
Yeah.
then how'd you go from messing around to let's call the big times,
Mhm.
and was it starting with competitions or what was how'd you go from point A to point B?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, to me, honestly, this whole longboarding journey has been just some random curveball out of left field. Before I started longboarding, I was like, and even throughout high school, I was like, I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna be an engineer. Um, and I just, was like, I'm gonna go to Oregon State University. That's the college
Yeah,
close by, boom, boom. I thought I had it figured out.
yeah,
And yeah, just I got a longboard, never really heard of it before. I skated up to my best friend's house, who lived a couple
yeah.
blocks up the street, and he was like, "Oh, my brother's got one of these." And his brother's like 5 years older. So we're like, "Okay, cool." We grabbed it, borrowed it, sweet, went to the park. My birthday was right around spring break. It's March 16th.
Yeah.
So in Oregon, spring break's a little like hit or miss. Sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's like full rain, sometimes it's sunny. This year was like super sunny, 2009, and I had this beautiful park with a soapbox derby track 2 blocks from my house.
Nice.
And so I just started showing up there because it was a nice little hill with no cars that, was fast, but not too fast. And over the course of that week, I went from never really seeing or being aware of longboarding to meeting like 25 different people in my city. A lot of kids that were older than me, all had boards. And they were, instantly it was like, "Hey, there's this race in like 2 weeks. Do you wanna go?" I was like, "Race?" I was like, "I don't know." I was like, "Okay, what do I need?" And I went to the pawn shop, and I got this like super thick leather jacket, and I got like a motorcycle helmet, and I was like, "I guess this is cool." I went to the race, and it's like some park path, but it was like, really, nowadays I can go 40 miles an hour or so on it. It's got a huge hairpin corner lined with blackberry bushes, 15 feet thick of blackberry bushes. Um, Fortunately, it was wet, because if it wasn't wet, I don't think I would have made it down the hill.
Right.
But I remember it was so wet, and I kind of like learned how to slow down and slide a little bit. And so I would just like barrel down half the hill, crash into the bushes, grab my board, bail down the rest of the hill, crash into the bushes. And I remember like never hearing about longboarding before. I ended up placing like, I don't know, 15th or something out of
Yeah,
30
yeah,
people. And I was like, "Hey, I'm
yeah.
not too bad at this. This is cool."
Right, right,
And then it
right,
was
right.
like, "Oh, then there's like a push race in 2 weeks." And I was like, "A push race? What's that?" It's like, "Okay, you like it's a distance thing. Like you skate around town. I was like, okay, well, I'm athletic. And I remember getting like, I don't know, top 5 or top 10
Uh-huh.
in that. And I was like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. This is sweet. And so I think just like those like first couple early wins like really hooked me into being like, wow, maybe I'm really good at this. And I had all these guys that are like 5 years older than me that are like, hey man, you're pretty good.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that it felt like it was something that was my own, because like with team sports, you're on a team and like you can only do so much. Like you can practice and practice and practice. Eventually you're passing the ball to somebody else is blocking somebody else. And so the outcome of the game is a collective effort. Whereas I
Sure.
felt like with this and with wrestling that I did from like 7th grade to junior year, is like I had like total control. And so it's like when I was slacking in wrestling, I'd get my ass whooped.
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know? And if I was slacking in skating, it's like, well, someone else just got to the bottom of the hill or got to the finish line quicker than I did. There's nobody else other than me. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think like having that and having like a real direct correlation with my like effort
Mm-hmm.
was really inspiring. And so I just kind of went from never knowing what longboarding was, and then there was a different event every 2 weeks. And I just did that for years. And bless my mom's heart, she ended up driving me and a couple friends to like nearby cities like Portland and Eugene to go to some of the events. And then just started, yeah, gaining the attention of some brands. And yeah, I just remembered this was early social media, 2009, 10. And
Mm-hmm.
I just remember looking at all the top riders that I aspired to be like, guys that were traveling the world and seemingly living like their best life. I was like, man, what are they doing? And how can I like, can I emulate them in some way? And I remember looking and I was like, well, they're all posting really epic pictures of them like 3 times a week. And
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
okay, cool. I have a video camera, like I have a camera, like I can set up the self timer. And like, I guess I'll go out and once a week, I'll go out and skate. I'll set up the self timer and I'll take a couple pictures and I'll just post a couple a week. And I was doing this with the GoPro camera,
Mm-hmm.
right, at the time. And I ended up getting a lot of attention through some of the content I was creating for GoPro. And I ended up winning a big competition they did when GoPro started doing photos. And then it just snowballed into like more and more and more and more and more. And I became an addict, basically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, basically.
No, that's a really cool journey. Now I'm also going to tie it back more to mental health. I'm just kind of
Mm,
is it sounds like it was something that you could basically lose yourself in doing, right?
mm.
And I think
Definitely.
that's important to one of the things that helped me get better was losing myself in certain things. Like you love skateboarding, or longboarding. I love to speak different languages. When you speak in a different language, you kind of lose where you are. Anthony, who's also with us, he loves to play the guitar. So there's something in there.
Mm,
I'm also curious. The other part to it is a big part for me and getting healthy was community, right?
mm.
So maybe you talk a little bit about there is the whole skateboard or longboarding. I mean, a huge community.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Sean, for that. I think that's actually the number one thing that I realized over the years is that like, for me, I first discovered longboarding and it became like a tool,
Yeah,
and an escape for me. But it was really like the friendships I made that really helped everything stick and glue together. If I was the only person in my town that was doing this, I definitely would not have done it as much as I did and to the extent that I did. And I think one of the things that was really special about skateboarding, as opposed to other team sports I was in, is that the moments you share have such have much more heightened emotions more frequently. Because like with team sports, it's like, yeah, you play around and like you maybe get one nice shot with somebody
sure.
or you win the game or whatever, and it's like a cool bonding moment. But when you're skating, especially down hills, and you're like bumping into each other or you're going through an intersection and then there's a car and you both like dodge it and you almost crash, it's just
Yes.
like, we almost died, but we didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Epic, so you have like the euphoria is just like goes crazy. And I think one of the ways that I got that a lot was even on smaller hills. It doesn't have to be the most gnarly, crazy, steepest, fastest hill, but even just somewhere like parking garages where you're only going
Hmm.
15, 20 miles an hour, we would have sessions where it's sometimes 50 or more people all going down at the same time. And so you're all bumping into each other like bumper cars. There's inevitably crashes. You're
Sure.
inevitably falling and dodging people, and nobody's getting really that hurt, but it's just really, really exciting. And so those bonds I formed with everybody um, was really the glue that held it together.
Right. Right. Yeah. For me too. In my journey. My other question is, I know that you had some challenges too. I know you kind of raised up through the ranks and then kind of had a, I don't know, epiphany moment where you were
Mm,
changing directions. Can you just tell us a little bit on that journey, or explain a little bit what happened to you and
yeah.
where you went?
Thank you, Sean. Yeah. So for me, really where skateboarding became much more serious is in 2015. I got a role as brand manager for this company. And so through that, like I now had a full travel budget and they were paying me to go to all the events. And I started to have like a lot more credibility because it was like, oh, he's the dude for that company.
Yeah.
Um, Through that, I was able to go to so many more competitions and events. And in 2015, I also got cast to be Vin Diesel's stunt double in that film,
Yeah.
which small town guy like me, my parents aren't making any money. Like
Yeah.
basically out of the blue, I get that opportunity that pays more than both my parents' salaries combined for the entire year for a couple weeks. And they were just like, whoa, okay. Like they're really skeptical in the beginning, and I don't blame
Yeah.
them because if
Yeah.
I
Of
had
course.
kids and they were like skating down hills, I'd be like really skeptical. But once that happened, they're like, "Okay, well, this is working for you. Keep doing it." And so for 4 years in a row, for 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, I traveled the majority of the year, and I would go to Europe every year for 3 months. I would go to California for a couple months. I'd go up to Canada, to New York, and all other places around the country, and it was
Hmm.
great. And for me, like, coming from, a less fortunate family, you could say.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't go on like big family vacations like this all the time. And for me, it was like I never knew when I was going to leave the country, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I never really thought about it. I was like, I'm just going to go engineering school, and boom, we'll do that. And so I kind of got caught in like this more mentality where it was like,
Hmm.
okay, cool, I'm doing this. Like this was my dream,
Yeah.
even just a year ago or 5 years ago. And I always wanted to be the guy that was, getting paid to go to all these events around Europe and whatever. But what ended up happening is after doing that for a few years, I really felt like the monotony in it. And I
Hmm.
felt like I was, not always the number one guy, but I was in the top.
Yeah.
I was in the top, and it just got to a point where it uh it felt just so ego driven, and there was a lot of like toxic masculinity in the people I was surrounded with. And
Hmm.
so even though we had cool moments, it was like, oh, that guy's like lame or not cool, or that guy's like thinks he's so cool and he's not, and like
Yeah.
whatever, like he doesn't deserve this opportunity, that. And like I started to feel all this weird tension, and I was like, felt like I was a big fish in a small pond, and I was just like, mm, it just started to feel I just didn't have the passion for it,
Yeah.
really. And I was like, kind of kept rethinking to myself. I was like, man, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Like, I love this, but also like I'm just nonstop back to back to back to back to back to back traveling, sleeping on couches, and everyone's saying I'm living the dream, but am I really? You
Sure.
know? And then I was reflecting on like, okay, well, why do I skate? Why is this important to me? And it's important to me because it came to me at a point in my life where I really needed an escape and I really needed something, and through it I found people,
Yeah.
and I found community. And this was around like 2018, 2019. I started coaching at a camp called Camp Woodwings in France, and I started doing some private lessons. I started doing more like workshops and like kind of like teaching give back. I learned I was really good at teaching. And what I never expected and what nobody ever expected to have happen, uh, that totally changed the course of what I was doing, was, COVID 2020,
Yeah,
right?
everybody.
I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
I was gearing yeah, you heard about it, right?
No, no, no. Keep going.
Yeah, so I geared up for I was gearing up for like a big couple month trip in Asia that I was really excited for. That like April, and I remember leading up to my birthday, it was like my birthday was actually the day they started the lockdowns. And so I was like,
Uh-huh.
well, this is kind of weird. And so
Yeah.
all the plans that I had for the whole summer and for everything shut down, moved back in with my dad. Also, all the events canceled,
Yep.
and it was really the best thing that ever happened to me because when I was jumping from event to event to event, I never let like my experiences sink in, and I was constantly like intaking, but I wasn't digesting
Mm-hmm.
experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so through that, I just like set a goal for myself. I was like, well, what's one thing I can do that like will keep me busy through this? And I was like, hey, I'll make like a 15-second tutorial on TikTok. I was like, boom, I'll just start doing that.
Yeah.
And this was at a time where a lot of people were using their phones.
Yeah, of
Also,
course.
at a time where a lot of people were wanting and curious about trying something new that wasn't going to the bar, going to music festivals, going to live events. And so I released that first tutorial, didn't think anything of it, and it got 5 million views.
Wow. Yeah.
And 5 million views and TikTok, you can't change the caption. So for
Right.
whatever reason, I don't know why I did this, but for whatever reason, I was like, hey, message me on Instagram if you want to learn more. And I ended up getting like over 500 messages within 24 hours. And I'm like, what do I do with this? And I remember like spending all night like responding to all these people. And I was like, well, okay, that was kind of wild. I was like, maybe people like this. Maybe this is good. And I did one the next week and it got 1 million views. And I was like,
Wow.
whoa, okay, more hundreds of messages. And it just started like, they just started piling in. And like, it was really cool to hear and see a lot of the comments of like, man, I've been struggling with that forever. You broke it down so well. I have it now. Like, I wasn't sure if longboarding was right for me, or I wasn't sure I was like good enough for this. And you really made it feel like I can be. And so getting that validation, and then seeing all the messages pile in, like it was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna 100% do this. And for like 65 weeks in a row, I did that, and I created a new tutorial every week, which then led into plenty of other projects. One of them being an online course, uh, and all these things came really quick. It was like I did all these tutorials. I moved to Los Angeles in June, just on a road trip, and I ended up staying, basically. And then started doing some private lessons. It was still weird. Everyone's like kind of wearing a mask still.
Yeah.
Then lessons were fully booked. And then it was like, okay, maybe I'll do an online course because like I condensed my information into something that's more packageable. And then that led into creating this AMP for learning skate tricks. And that was like December. That then in like April or March even launched a nonprofit called the Longboard Dancing Foundation, where we were like doing free lessons in Santa Monica on a weekly basis. It grew to be 50, 60 people every week. Half the people had never been on a board before. And so me trying to like workshop with a very small team, how to like host a great workshop when you're like 2 or 3 people for 50 people, was an experience, which then another thing I never would have expected happen. I had Facebook and Droga5, the agency, reach out to me around that same time, April.
Mhm.
And they were like, hey, we saw your tutorials. You're obviously the most knowledgeable guy about this topic and longboarding and these tricks. Can we hire you to be one of the talent in this new commercial we're creating for the Olympics? And can you help us like choreograph it? And I was like, yeah, perfect. And so that was another good chunk of money. And I was like, man, what can I do with this? It'd be so cool. What's the next evolution of like this idea and this teaching and spreading love and positivity through skating?
Yeah.
And I was like, obviously I'm going to buy a school bus and pimp it out, paint it like an Easter basket, and drive around the country. And so that's what we did. And that's how Beyond the Board started.
That's an awesome story. And congratulations. It's kind
Thank
of
you. Thank you.
a crazy ride. So we're coming towards the end, but maybe you can tell us, about a little bit about the road trip and what you're trying to do and achieve with the tour. And I've seen the bus, super cool, and where you're going with that.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, so really the mission of Beyond the Board is to use skateboarding to empower people with confidence and to build community. And like the why of that and like why does it matter is like right now, like I'm sure you've seen this, but the world is increasingly polarizing and divided. And it's really easy to look at a computer screen and be like, who's this guy I think he is?
Sure.
And just completely dismiss people and their ideas and for race, religion, creed, whatever it may be. And I know that one of the strongest ways that we can have more unity and more empathy for each other is positive real life experiences. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's really difficult to share a moment with somebody, especially when you're both learning something new or you're like
Yeah.
co-creating or teaching, and then to look at them in the eyes and totally dismiss their thoughts and opinions. And I think people nowadays need to have, number one, more joy. They need to have a stronger sense of community and belonging and purpose. Um, and they need to have more empathy for each other, because I think like the world that I want to live in, people know how to take a deep breath, people have a smile on their face, and people support and love each other, you know. And so through this project Beyond the Board, we basically host over 100 skateboarding events and meetups and experiences around the country with the intention of co-creating the world that we want to live in, a world full of like joy and happiness and fun and playfulness.
No, that's awesome, and I want to say that's an awesome mission, and was super excited to have you on the show. Where can people
Thank you,
find out
Sean.
information on that?
Yeah, so the best place is probably our website. It's beyondtheboard.org. Yep.
Okay, we're gonna go to beyondtheboard.org. All right, Brandon,
Thank you.
I'm psyched for you. It was a great journey, ups and downs, and more to come.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that, man.
Okay, my friend. All right, goodbye, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. Bye bye.
Cheers.